I arrived early at my daughter's house to organize her surprise birthday party. Then I caught my future son-in-law and her best friend together in the bathtub. I quietly locked the bathroom door from the outside and made 2 calls, one to my daughter and one to that woman's husband. When they both arrived, well, let us just say the surprise party ended up being for someone else. Where are you watching us from today? Leave your location in the comments and please like and subscribe to the Elderly Stories channel. But let me tell you from the beginning how a 62-year-old grandmother became the best unlicensed private detective you have ever met. That Wednesday morning, March 15th, I woke up early as always. At 62, my body no longer needs an alarm clock. Or maybe after 4 decades of getting up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast for a family, my internal clock is permanently set to mother hen mode. Sarah, my only daughter, was turning 32 that Friday, and I had planned the perfect surprise. Well, as perfect as a surprise can be when your daughter is a digital marketing executive who probably already checked her calendar and noticed the suspicious pattern of calls between her friends. But a mother has the right to dream right. I dressed in my favorite blue blouse, the one Sarah gave me last year, telling me it made me look sophisticated but accessible. I never knew what the hell that meant, but coming from a woman who uses words like synergy and optimization in casual conversation, I took it as a compliment. The plan was simple. Arrive at her apartment at 2 in the afternoon when she was supposedly in an important board meeting that would last until 5. Her boyfriend Daniel would give me the keys. He had a copy for 3 months now, something that seemed rushed to me, but I kept it to myself because for once in my life, my daughter seemed truly happy. And Daniel seemed like a good man, 35 years old. Systems engineer at the same company where Sarah worked with that slightly formal courtesy that reminded me of my late husband when we were young. He always stood up when I entered the room. He always asked about my health. He always insisted on carrying the grocery bags when he came to visit. Of course, there was also Jessica. Jessica Davis, the best friend Sarah had recently acquired at work. 28 years old, blonde hair that changed shades every month, and that smile that made you feel like you were the least interesting person in the world. They had connected immediately, according to Sarah, because they both had the same aggressive business vision. I had a different vision about Jessica, but I learned a long time ago that telling your adult daughter you do not like her friend is the social equivalent of tattooing meddling mother-in-law on your forehead. I took the bus downtown. Yes, the bus, because unlike my daughter who sees Uber as a basic service like running water, I still believe that $20 for a 20-minute ride is daylight robbery. During the ride, I went over my mental list. Gold balloons, Sarah's favorites since childhood, 3 milk cake from the Garcia Bakery, her absolute favorite fresh flowers, and enough food to feed the 15 friends who were supposedly coming. What I did not have on my list was an amateur detective kit. But life has a curious way of preparing you for things you never knew you needed. I arrived at Sarah's building exactly at 2:00, a modern building in the downtown district with that air of new prosperity that screams people who understand Bitcoin and quinoa live here. The doorman, Mr. Henderson, already knew me well. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Parker. Are you here to see Miss Sarah? Today is the surprise. Mr. Henderson, remember, if she asks, you have not seen me." Mr. Henderson winked at me. "Which Mrs. Parker? I do not know any Mrs. Parker." I went up to the 8th floor humming Happy Birthday under my breath. Daniel had given me the keys the night before, along with a smile so genuine that for a moment I thought maybe my daughter had finally found one of the good ones. How naive I was. I opened the apartment door and immediately noticed that something was not right. The television was on, but on mute. There were 2 cups of coffee on the coffee table, both still steaming, and there was a female laugh coming from the master bathroom. It was not Sarah's laugh. I stood frozen in the entryway, holding my bags full of decorations, feeling as if the world had decided to change the rules of the game without warning me. The laughter was accompanied by another voice, a male voice I definitely recognized. Daniel. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was hearing. After all, Daniel was supposedly at a work conference until 4. He had specifically told me that the night before. Mrs. Parker, the conference ends at 4, so I will be back at 4:30 to help with the final preparations. But that was definitely his voice, along with that laugh that I now identified as belonging to Jessica. I left the bags on the floor with the care of a bomb disposal specialist and headed down the hallway. Every step seemed to sound like a hammer on concrete, but apparently they were too busy to notice. "Daniel, my love, this is perfect." I heard Jessica's voice crystal clear. "Sarah suspects nothing." I know Daniel replied, and there was something in his tone that froze my blood. It was not the voice of the polite and considerate man I knew. It was different, colder. After today, everything will change. I got closer to the bathroom door. It was ajar, and through the vanity mirror I could partially see what I did not want to see. Daniel and Jessica in the bathtub, in a position that was definitely not included in the platonic friendship handbook. But it was not the betrayal that paralyzed me. It was the conversation that followed. "Do you think it has been enough time?" asked Jessica. "Yes, it has been 4 months. Enough time for her to trust me completely. Access to her accounts is almost complete. And what about her mother, does she still suspect?" Daniel laughed in a way I had never heard before. "The old hag, please. She is so desperate to see me married she would accept me marrying a cactus. She thinks I am the perfect son-in-law." Jessica laughed too. Poor thing. She has no idea what awaits her. At that moment, something broke inside me. It was not my heart. That would have been too dramatic. It was something more practical. My capacity to be the compliant mother-in-law who stays quiet and smiles while others make decisions for her. With the calm of a woman who has raised teenagers and survived 3 decades of marriage, I closed the bathroom door from the outside and turned the key, which conveniently was on the outside. Then I took out my phone and dialed the first number. "Sarah, it is Mom. I know you were in your meeting, but I need you to come home right now. It is urgent. Mom." "What happened? Are you okay?" "I am perfectly fine, daughter. Just come and do not tell anyone where you are going." I hung up and dialed the second number. "Michael, this is Emily Parker, Sarah's mom. We met at the company dinner." "Yes, exactly." "Hey, where is your wife Jessica right now?" There was a pause. "At work," she told me. "Why?" "Because I have something very interesting to show you. Can you come to my daughter's apartment? I will send you the address." While I waited, I sat on Sarah's sofa and listened to the increasingly desperate sounds coming from the bathroom. First, they tried to open the door naturally, then with more force, finally with absolute panic. "Hey, the door is stuck," shouted Daniel. "It is not stuck, you idiot. Someone locked us in," replied Jessica. And for the first time since I met her, her voice had lost that irritating confidence. For the moment, I allowed myself a small smile as I opened a magazine that was on the coffee table. After all, I had time to kill before the real show started. Because one thing I had learned in 62 years of life: when someone underestimates an older woman, they are generally making the most expensive mistake of their lives. Let me tell you how we got to this situation, because the story of a betrayed woman always starts long before the moment of betrayal. My daughter Sarah was born on March 17, 1991, after 8 hours of labor that I swear my husband Ralph would need psychological therapy for the rest of his life. From the moment they put her in my arms, I knew this girl was going to be different. While other babies cried for hunger, Sarah cried for scheduling. If I did not give her the bottle at exactly the same times every day, she threw tantrums that could be heard 3 blocks away. By age 2, she had already organized her toys by color, size, and frequency of use. At 5, she corrected me when I used the wrong grammar. Ralph used to joke saying our daughter had been born with a built-in agenda and an inefficiency detector. I simply prayed she would not decide to rearrange the whole house according to her standards of perfection. When Ralph died in a car accident 7 years ago, Sarah was 25 and had just finished her master's degree in business administration. Instead of collapsing like any normal person, she put on her most formal black suit for the funeral and announced she would take charge of the situation. Mom, she told me that same night while organizing her father's life insurance papers with the efficiency of a certified accountant. I am going to make sure you never have to worry about money, and she kept her word. In 7 years, she went from being a junior employee at a digital marketing agency to running her own department at Strategic Digital Innovation, Inc., a company that, according to her, optimizes the consumer experience on multi-platform platforms, and according to me, probably does something related to the internet. Her salary tripled in 5 years. She moved to that apartment in the upscale district, bought a car that costs more than I earned in the last 3 years, and more importantly, insisted on paying me a monthly allowance that allowed me to leave my job at the dry cleaners and live comfortably for the first time in my life. It is not charity, Mom, she would tell me every time I tried to protest. It is an investment I invested my whole life in raising and caring for you. Now it is time to get the dividends. That was my Sarah. Even her gestures of love sounded like a PowerPoint presentation. But do not misunderstand me, I was proud of her, more proud than words can express. And after years of seeing her work until 2 in the morning, studying, listening to her rehearsed presentations in her bedroom mirror, enduring her nervous breakdowns when she thought she was not good enough, finally life was giving her what she deserved. However, something changed last year. Sarah started talking about expanding her professional network and building strategic alliances. In normal terms, that meant she started going out, more attending company events, and bringing new names into our weekly phone conversations. The first name was Daniel Miller. He is the head of the Technology Development Department. She explained during one of our monthly dinners in October. Very smart, very focused, we are collaborating on an important project. The second time she mentioned him, he was no longer the department head. He was Daniel. The third time. Daniel and I went for coffee after the meeting. By December, Daniel was coming to dinner with us, and I have to admit I was impressed. Not only was he handsome, although he definitely was, with those sharp features and brown eyes that seemed to really listen to what you said, but he also had that old-fashioned courtesy you do not see much in men his age anymore. He stood up when I entered the room. He asked about my health with genuine interest. He insisted on helping with the dishes after dinner. He brought flowers for Sarah, but he also brought little gifts for me. A sweet bread from a new bakery he had discovered, or a book he thought I would like. He is perfect, I told my friend Linda after the third dinner. Too perfect. Men like that do not exist. Oh, Emily, Linda replied while we drank coffee in her kitchen. You are very suspicious. Your daughter deserves a good man. And she was right. Sarah deserved everything good life could offer her. So I swallowed my reservations and decided to give Daniel the benefit of the doubt. It was then that Jessica appeared. There is a new girl at work, Sarah told me in January. Jessica Davis. She is incredibly talented. Unlike Daniel, who had been introduced gradually into our conversations, Jessica appeared like an explosion. Out of nowhere, Sarah could not stop talking about her. Jessica had this brilliant idea for such and such client. Jessica had solved a problem they had been trying to fix for months. Jessica knew this amazing restaurant. Jessica, Jessica, Jessica. I met her in February when Sarah organized a small gathering at her apartment to celebrate a project they had completed. Jessica arrived dressed as if she were going to a photo shoot for a business magazine. Immaculate white blazer skirt that cost more than my monthly rent heels that made an authoritative sound when she walked. 28 years old blonde, obviously dyed with that confidence women have who have grown up being the prettiest in the classroom. Mrs. Parker, she told me when Sarah introduced us, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I have heard so much about you. Sarah adores you. Her smile was perfect. Her tone was perfect. Everything about her was so perfectly correct that my maternal instinct immediately went on code red alert. But what really bothered me was not Jessica herself. It was how Sarah changed when she was around her. My daughter, who had always been secure and direct, suddenly started seeking Jessica's approval for everything. Do not you think Jessica became her favorite phrase? When Jessica spoke, Sarah looked at her as if she were receiving divine revelations, and Jessica, for her part, was clearly aware of her influence. "Sarah, dear," she would tell her with that condescending tone she used when speaking to me. "You should update your wardrobe. Those blouses are very conservative for someone in your position. Oh, Sarah, you have to start frequenting places where the right people are. You cannot advance in your career if you only socialize with, well, you know, I was included in that, well, you know." When I tried to talk to Sarah about my reservations, I was met with resistance I had never seen in her. Mom Jessica is my friend and my colleague. She is trying to help me. Honey, I'm just saying that maybe. Mom, with all due respect, Jessica understands the modern corporate world in a way that it is different from your experience. That conversation was in February. By March, Jessica was practically part of the family, even though I had never received a formal invitation to accept her as such. And then something interesting happened. Daniel and Jessica met during a joint department meeting in early March. According to Sarah, they connected immediately over process optimization strategies, whatever that means. "It is wonderful," Sarah told me on the phone that night. "My two favorite people from work are getting along so well." Suddenly, all group outings included Daniel and Jessica. All dinners at home included Daniel and Jessica. All of Sarah's conversations included anecdotes about how brilliant this new alliance between her two favorite colleagues was. I watched from a distance, serving them coffee and pretending to smile while Daniel explained technical aspects of some project to Jessica, and Jessica gave him advice on how to position himself strategically within the company. There was something in the way they looked at each other that unsettled me. But every time I tried to define what exactly it was, I came to the conclusion that maybe I was the one seeing things where there were none. After all, what did a 62-year-old woman know about modern professional dynamics? But now, sitting on my daughter's sofa, listening to her desperate screams from the bathroom, I realized my maternal instinct had been right all along. The difference was that now I had the proof, and more importantly, now I had a plan. Michael Davis arrived exactly 15 minutes after my call, and by the way he was sweating and breathing, it was evident he had run from his car to the elevator. "Mrs. Parker," he said as soon as I opened the door, "is everything okay? Where is Jessica?" Michael was completely different from his wife. Where Jessica was polished and calculated, he was genuine and a bit unkempt. 32 years old civil engineer with hands that showed he actually worked with them, and that direct way of speaking that needs no corporate filters. "She is here," I told him, with the calm of a woman who had just discovered she had a master's degree in drama without knowing it. "But before you see her, I need to explain something to you." The screams from the bathroom had stopped 5 minutes ago. Now normal voices were heard, probably because they had exhausted all their obvious options and were trying to formulate a plan. "I do not understand," said Michael, looking around the apartment. "Jessica told me she would be working late today. What is she doing here?" "That's exactly the right question, Michael." I guided him to the sofa and poured him a glass of water. "When was the last time you spoke to Jessica today?" "This morning, before leaving for work. She told me she had an important presentation and would arrive home late." Michael frowned. "Mrs. Parker, you are making me nervous. What is happening?" Before I could answer, we heard the sound of keys in the main lock. Sarah had arrived. "Mom," she shouted from the entrance. "Where are you? What is so urgent?" "In the living room, my love," I replied. "Come, there is someone I want you to meet." Sarah appeared in the hallway in her work suit, and that expression of controlled worry she put on when something interrupted her carefully planned schedule. She stopped dead when she saw Michael. "Hello," she said with that automatic courtesy she uses with strangers. "You are Michael Davis," he replied, standing up to shake her hand. "Jessica's husband." I saw confusion cross Sarah's face like a storm cloud. Jessica's husband. But what is he doing here? Where is Jessica? That, I said, getting up from the sofa, is an excellent question. I walked toward the hallway leading to the bathroom, followed by Sarah and Michael. The sounds from the bathroom had returned. Now they were whispering urgently, probably trying to coordinate a story. "Jessica." I said loudly toward the closed door. "Your husband is here." The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the kitchen wall clock ticking the seconds. "My husband?" Jessica's voice sounded strangled. What are you doing here, Michael? "I came because Mrs. Parker called me," replied Michael. And there was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there 5 minutes before. "She told me she needed to show me something about my wife." Mom Sarah grabbed my arm. "What is happening? Why is Jessica in my bathroom? Why can she not come out?" Because I said with the satisfaction of a woman who can finally tell the truth without worrying about the consequences, she is inside there with Daniel. I watched the information process in Sarah's brain. First confusion, then gradual understanding, finally complete horror. With Daniel, my Daniel, your Daniel, I confirmed. I have been here 30 minutes listening to their conversation. And let me tell you, daughter, what I heard goes far beyond simple infidelity. Michael had turned pale. "Jessica, is it true? Are you in there with another man?" "Michael, can I explain?" Jessica's voice had lost all its corporate authority. Now she sounded like a little girl who had been caught stealing candy. "Daniel," said Sarah toward the door, and her voice was so cold it reminded me of her father when he was really angry. "Do you have something to say?" Sarah Daniel started, but his voice faded out. Apparently, all his charms worked better when he was not literally trapped in a bathtub with another man's wife. "Before you start with your explanations," I interrupted, "there is something else you need to know." I took out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "Michael, Sarah. I want you to listen to this." I pressed play on the recording I had made during the last 30 minutes. My voice was heard clearly. "Jessica, do you think it has been enough time?" "Yes, it has been 4 months. Enough time for her to trust me completely. Access to her accounts is almost complete." The silence in the hallway was deafening. Michael leaned against the wall as if he had received a physical blow. Sarah looked at me with a mix of horror and admiration. "Go on," I said, "and let the recording continue. And what about her mother? Does she still suspect?" Daniel laughing. "The old hag, please. She is so desperate to see me married she would accept me marrying a cactus. She thinks I am the perfect son-in-law. Poor thing. She has no idea what awaits her." When I finished the recording, Michael was shaking with fury and Sarah had gone completely white. "Access to my accounts," whispered Sarah. "Daniel, what are they talking about?" "It is complicated," started Daniel from the bathroom. "It is not complicated," shouted Michael. "It is theft and adultery." He started pounding on the bathroom door. "Jessica, open this door right now." "Michael, calm down," I said, putting myself between him and the door. "Before you do something you might regret, there is more information you need to have." "More information." Sarah looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. "Mom, what else do you know? I know Daniel has been obtaining information about your finances for months. I know Jessica has been manipulating you to distance you from the people who really love you." I turned toward the bathroom door. "And I know you too have gravely underestimated the old lady who discovered you." Mrs. Parker said Daniel, and for the first time his voice sounded desperate. "This is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "Is it also a misunderstanding that you are naked in my daughter's bathtub with a married woman?" Michael made a sound that was half sob, half roar of fury. 5 years of marriage," he murmured. 5 years. Michael said Jessica from the bathroom, and now she was crying. "Please let me explain. Explain what he asked. Explain how you have been planning to steal money. What do you want to explain?" "Jessica." Sarah sat heavily on the hallway sofa. "I cannot believe this. I cannot believe I was so blind." "You were not blind, my daughter," I told her sitting beside her. "You were trusting. There is a difference." But all the signs were there. The way they looked at each other. How Jessica always knew things about Daniel that he had not told me. How he always seemed to know exactly what to say when Jessica was present. Sarah called Daniel from the bathroom. "Please, I need to talk to you. Alone." No, I said firmly. The times for private conversations are over. From now on, everything is spoken in front of witnesses. I got up and walked to the bathroom door. Daniel, Jessica, I am going to make you a proposal. You can come out of there when you have told me exactly what your plan was, the whole plan without omitting details. And if I discover you are lying to me about something, anything, then the next conversation we have will be with the police present. We cannot, started Jessica. Of course you can. I interrupted because the alternative is Michael calling the police right now for adultery and Sarah pressing charges for fraud. And believe me, after what I heard today, I have all the evidence I need to ruin your lives for the next 10 years, Mom whispered. Sarah, did you really record all this? I showed her my phone. 43 minutes of clear evidence, including the part where they discuss accelerating the timeline because the old lady is starting to suspect. Michael looked at me with an admiration I did not expect. Mrs. Parker, you're incredible. I am not incredible. Michael, I am just a mother who knows her children well enough to know when something is wrong. From the bathroom came the sound of urgent murmurs. Daniel and Jessica were obviously coordinating their response. You have 30 seconds, I announced, before Michael calls the police and Sarah calls her bank to report fraudulent activity on her accounts. Okay, shouted Jessica. We will tell you everything, everything, I repeated, starting with how much money you have stolen already. What I did not know at that moment was that the answer to that question was going to be much more complicated than I expected, and that Daniel and Jessica's plan was just the tip of the iceberg. Because when they started talking, I realized my discovery of the day had saved Sarah from something much worse than a simple financial scam. You need to sit down for this, said Jessica from behind the bathroom door, and something in her tone made me fear what was coming next. We are already sitting. I lied, although in reality Michael was pacing like a caged lion, and Sarah seemed to be considering punching a hole in the wall. The plan started Daniel, and then stopped. My God, I cannot believe I'm saying this. Say it demanded Sarah separating every syllable like they were gunshots. Now. Daniel and I have been together for 8 months, confessed Jessica, from before he started dating you. Sarah gasped, as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over her head. 8 months, I repeated slowly. But Daniel and Sarah have been dating for 4 months. Exactly, said Daniel, and I could hear the shame in his voice. The relationship with Sarah was part of the plan. Michael stopped dead. Part of what plan? We were going to scam money, said Jessica quickly, as if letting it out all at once was less painful. Daniel was going to make Sarah fall in love, get access to her finances, and then transfer the money to offshore accounts. How much money? Asked Sarah, and her voice was so controlled, it scared me. Everything, admitted Daniel, her savings, her investments. Your company retirement fund, we calculated approximately $500,000. The number fell like a bomb in the silence of the hallway. 500,000. Sarah stood up so quickly she stumbled. $500,000. You were going to steal my entire life. Not everything, said Jessica quickly. We were going to leave enough so it was not immediately obvious. How considerate, shouted Michael, as if that makes it better. I was processing the information with the speed of an overloaded computer. But if you have been together 8 months, why did Jessica get into my company? Why become Sarah's friend? Because we needed information, explained Jessica. Sarah is very private with her finances. She never tells anyone how much she earns or where she has her accounts. I needed to gain her trust to get that information. And I needed to distance her from people who might suspect, added Daniel. Especially from you, Mrs. Parker. From the beginning, you were cautious with me because my maternal instinct works better than this house's Wi-Fi, I murmured. So, said Sarah, slowly, all our friendship was fake. Every piece of advice you gave me every night we spent talking about our dreams. Every moment you made me feel like I had finally found a sister. It was all a lie. Not everything, whispered Jessica. I came to like you. Do not give me that, exploded Sarah. Do not dare say you cared for me while planning to ruin my life." Michael had started gently banging his head against the wall. "I cannot believe this. I cannot believe I married a criminal. I never wanted it to go that far," said Jessica, and now she was sobbing. "At first I was just going to make quick money, but then the situation got complicated. Complicated how I asked, because there was something in Jessica's tone that told me we still had not reached the bottom of the matter." There was a long pause before Daniel answered. "It got complicated when we realized Sarah was going to change her will." "My will?" Sarah went pale. "How do you know about my will?" "Because," said Daniel with a barely audible voice, "I was going to propose to you next month." The world stopped. Michael stopped hitting his head against the wall. Sarah stopped breathing. I felt as if the floor had become liquid under my feet. "You were going to propose to me," whispered Sarah. "What for?" "To make sure that when you were no longer here, I would inherit everything." "When I was no longer here," repeated Sarah. "What does it mean when I was no longer here?" The silence that followed was the most terrifying I had heard in my life. "Daniel," I said with a calm, "I did not feel exactly what were you going to do to my daughter. We were not going to hurt anyone," said Jessica quickly. "We just needed it to look like an accident." Michael threw up. He literally leaned over and threw up in my daughter's hallway. "An accident," repeated Sarah like a robot. "You were going to kill me and make it look like an accident." "No," screamed Daniel. "We were not going to kill you. We just needed you to disappear for a while." "Disappear for a while." My voice went up 3 octaves. "What the hell does that mean?" "We were going to drug you," confessed Jessica. "Some pills that would make you sleep deeply for several days. Enough time to transfer the money and disappear." "But the drugs we got," added Daniel, "slowly were stronger than we thought. There was a possibility you would not wake up." "A possibility," repeated Michael. "A possibility that you killed an innocent woman for money." "And if I did not wake up," said Sarah with a voice I did not recognize, "you were going to keep all my money as my grieving widower and my best friend in mourning." "Sarah," started Daniel. "No," screamed Sarah. "Do not say my name. You have no right to say my name." She got up from the sofa and walked to the bathroom door. "Daniel Miller, I love you. I love you so much I changed my whole life to include you. I stopped seeing my friends because Jessica convinced me they were toxic for my growth. I stopped telling my problems to my mother because you told me I needed to be more independent. I changed the way I dress, the way I speak, the way I think, all because I wanted to be the woman you deserved." Her voice broke, but she continued. "And you never loved me. You did not even see me as a person. You only saw numbers in a bank account and an idiot naive enough to hand over her life for love. Sarah, I and you, Jessica." She continued, turning to the door. "You made me believe I had finally found a true friend, someone who understood me, who supported me, who wanted the best for me. You made me push away my mother, the only person who truly loves me, because you convinced me it was codependent to keep a close relationship with her." Sarah turned to me with tears running down her cheeks. "Mom, forgive me. Forgive me for doubting your instinct. Forgive me for leaving you out of my life. Forgive me for being so stupid." I hugged her with the strength of a woman who had just recovered her daughter from the edge of a cliff. "You have nothing to apologize for, my love, nothing at all." Over her shoulder, I saw Michael dialing numbers on his phone. "Who are you calling?" "The police," he replied without looking up. "This is attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." "Michael, wait," I said quickly. "Before you make that call, I need 5 more minutes with them." "Why?" "Because," I said, looking toward the bathroom door, "I need to know what else they are hiding, and I have the feeling we still haven't reached the worst part." "Worst part?" whispered Sarah. "What can be worse than this?" "I do not know my daughter, but after 30 years of being a mother, I have learned that when someone confesses something terrible, it is generally because they are trying to hide something even worse." I walked to the bathroom door and put my hand on the cold surface. "Daniel, Jessica, I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and if you lie to me, I swear on my husband's memory, you are going to spend the next 20 years in jail. I waited a moment for the weight of my words to settle. Are there other victims? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Other victims. Daniel's voice sounded as if he had swallowed ground glass. What do you mean? Do not play dumb with me, I replied with the patience of a woman who had just discovered her tolerance for lies had permanently run out. You two did not wake up one day and decide to scam my daughter. This is too well planned, too coordinated. How many other women have you done this to? Mom whispered Sarah. Do you think I was not the first? Honey scammers do not start with $500,000 plans. They start small and raise the stakes. I got closer to the bathroom door. Jessica, how many best friends have you had in the last 2 years? There was a murmur of urgent conversation behind the door before Jessica answered. 3, she finally admitted. Before Sarah, there were 3. Michael dropped onto the sofa as if someone had cut his legs. 3. Have you been doing this for years? And Daniel, I asked, how many girlfriends have you had that you casually met through work? The same 3, said Daniel, and for the first time since this confession started. He sounded genuinely ashamed, but with them we did not get that far, define that far. With the first one, Linda Ramirez, we only got $5,000 before she realized something was wrong. She realized how asked Sarah. Her brother was an accountant, explained Jessica. He checked her finances and realized there were strange transfers. Linda broke up with Daniel immediately, and the other 2, I insisted. Lucy Vargas continued Daniel. We got $25,000 from her, but her ex-boyfriend kept in touch and started asking uncomfortable questions about me. And the third, Patricia Mendoza, said Jessica, and there was something different in her voice. With her, we got further. How much further, asked Michael, and I could hear he already knew he did not want the answer. $90,000, admitted Daniel. And we almost got married. Almost, I repeated. What happened? There was another long pause. Patricia had an accident, said Jessica finally. The air in the hallway became thick, like gelatin. What kind of accident? Asked Sarah with a voice that seemed to come from very far away. Did she fall down the stairs of her apartment? Explained Daniel. The night before our wedding. My God, screamed Michael. You killed her. No, protested Jessica. It was a real accident. Patricia had been drinking because she was nervous about the wedding. She tripped over her own feet. And casually, this happened after you had already transferred her money, I asked. Not all the money, said Daniel defensively. Only what we had been able to access up to that point. Patricia survived, added Jessica quickly. She was in a coma for 3 weeks, but she survived, although she had brain damage. Brain damage, repeated Sarah as if the words were in a foreign language. Mild Daniel rushed to clarify. Short-term memory problems, difficulty concentrating, nothing that cannot be handled. And you guys took off while she was in the hospital, asked Michael. We canceled the wedding out of respect, said Jessica. And the audacity of those words took my breath away. We said it was too painful to continue after the tragedy. But you kept her money, I observed. Patricia does not remember the transfers, admitted Daniel. The brain damage affected her memory of the weeks before the accident. I sat on the hallway floor because my legs could no longer hold me. Let me see if I understand this correctly, I said slowly. You have scammed 4 women. The first one you stole $5,000. The second, $25,000. The third, $90,000. And the third ended up with permanent brain damage. But it was an accident, insisted Jessica. A real accident. And now I continued. You came to my daughter with a plan to steal $500,000 and possibly kill her in the process. We were not going to kill her, protested Daniel. The drugs were just going to make her sleep. The same drugs that were stronger than you thought, asked Sarah. The same drugs you admitted might not let me wake up. It was a minimal risk, said Jessica. We calculated there was only a 10% chance that 10% screamed, Michael. You were willing to accept a 10% chance of murdering an innocent woman. And after Sarah, I said, because my brain had started connecting patterns that terrified me. Who came next? Did you already have the next victim in sight? The silence was deafening. Daniel, I said with deadly calm, did you already have the next victim in sight? There was a girl in human resources, he admitted. Anna Harris, 28 years old, recently divorced with a good savings fund. And had you already started the approach process? Jessica had started becoming her friend, confessed Daniel, but they had only spoken a few times. Sarah jumped to her feet. We have to warn Anna. We have to call the police right now. Wait, I said, getting up too. There is something else I need to know. I approached the bathroom door and put both hands on it. Patricia Mendoza. Where is she now? In a rehab clinic in Phoenix, replied Jessica. Her family moved there after the accident to be close to specialized facilities. And you have never tried to contact her. You have never tried to apologize, help with her medical expenses. How are we going to help without admitting guilt? Asked Daniel. Besides, Patricia remembers nothing about us. But her family remembers, said Michael slowly. Her family remembers the fiancé who disappeared after their daughter had a convenient accident. It was not convenient, protested Jessica. It was the pattern, screamed Sarah. Do not you see it? Linda realized, so they took off fast. Lucy started suspecting, so they took off. Patricia had her accident, so they took off. And I was going to be next. But with you, it was going to be different, said Daniel weakly. With you, we had planned everything perfectly. With you, they were going to make sure the accident was fatal, corrected Michael. I moved away from the door and walked to the living room window. I needed fresh air and a moment to process everything I had just heard. 4 victims, 1 with permanent brain damage, a 5th victim already in their sights, and my daughter had been weeks away from becoming the 6th or possibly the 1st fatal victim. Sarah, I said, turning to her, call the police now. It was about time, murmured Michael, and dialed emergency on his own phone. Mom said Sarah while dialing. How did you know? How did you know to ask the right questions? Because I replied, looking toward the bathroom door where 2 people had destroyed multiple lives for money. After 62 years in this world, I have learned that when someone lies to you about something small, it is generally because they are hiding something big. And because I added more softly, a mother always knows when something is trying to hurt her children, even when her children do not know. While we waited for the police to arrive, I could not help thinking about Patricia Mendoza in Phoenix, fighting every day with the consequences of an accident that maybe had not been as accidental as everyone thought. But that, I decided, would be an investigation for after Daniel and Jessica were safely behind bars. For now, I had to focus on the fact that my daughter was alive. She was safe. And she had learned one of life's most important lessons, that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who tell you exactly what you want to hear. The sound of sirens in the distance told me that justice finally was on its way. The police arrived exactly 17 minutes after our calls, time that Daniel and Jessica used to beg, threaten, and finally try to negotiate from their makeshift prison in the bathroom. Mrs. Parker Daniel had said 5 minutes earlier, we can reach an agreement, we will return all the money we took from the other victims. With what money, I had responded, I bet you already spent it on expensive clothes and romantic vacations. I had been correct. When officers Lewis and King arrived at the apartment, the first thing they noticed was the incongruity between 2 supposedly successful professionals locked in a bathroom and a 62-year-old grandmother who had strategically outsmarted them. Ma'am, said Officer Lewis after I explained the basic situation, are you telling me you stopped 2 scammers by yourself? I did not stop them, I clarified while handing them my phone with the recordings. I just held them until you could arrive to do your job. Officer King, a young man probably not much older than Sarah, listened to the recordings with an expression that went from skepticism to horror in the course of 5 minutes. This is solid evidence, he said finally. Do you have any additional documentation? I have this, I said, handing him a folder I had prepared while we waited. During the last 20 minutes, I had been meticulously documenting everything, times, names, dates, and every detail Daniel and Jessica had confessed. Yes, I am obsessive with organization. It is a charming defect I inherited from my mother, and that apparently turns out useful when you are building a criminal case. Mrs. Parker said, Officer Lewis, after reviewing my notes, would you consider working for the department? Because this documentation is better than that of many professional investigators. Thank you, but I already have a full-time job being a grandmother detective, I replied, although apparently it is more dangerous than I thought. When they finally opened the bathroom door, Daniel and Jessica came out with the dignity of two wet raccoons. Jessica immediately started crying and asking to speak to a lawyer. Daniel, to his limited credit, stayed silent until they put the handcuffs on him. Sarah, he told me while the officers took him out of the apartment. I am sorry, I really am sorry. My daughter looked at him with a coldness I did not know she possessed. Daniel, the only reason I feel anything right now is pity. Pity because you are so pathetic that you needed to hurt innocent women to feel successful. Those were not the words of the sweet and trusting Sarah I had raised. They were the words of a woman who had learned in the course of 2 hours that people can be much crueler than she had ever imagined. After they took Daniel and Jessica away, we stayed silent in Sarah's apartment. Michael had decided to accompany the officers to press additional charges for adultery and fraud, which left us alone for the first time since this nightmare began. Mom said Sarah sitting on her sofa and looking around the apartment as if it were the first time she saw it. I am scared. Scared of what my daughter. Scared that I can never trust anyone again. Scared that every person who smiles at me is calculating how much money they can get out of me. Scared that I am so naive this will happen again. I sat beside her and took her hand. Sarah, do you know what the difference is between being naive and being trusting? No. A naive person does not learn from their mistakes. A trusting person learns to trust better. I looked her directly in the eyes. You are not naive. You are a victim of people who are experts in manipulation. But I should have seen the signs. What signs? That Daniel was polite. That Jessica seemed like a good friend. That both behaved exactly like two normal people developing a genuine friendship with you. Sarah sighed. When you put it like that, besides, I added with a smile, now you have something you did not have before. What? A mother who has proven to be quite good at detecting liars. I leaned back on the sofa, and who clearly has no problems confronting them when necessary. Sarah laughed for the first time in hours. Mom, you are incredible. The way you handled all this was like seeing a professional detective in action. 62 years of life experience, my daughter. That includes dealing with dishonest salesmen, lying politicians, and creative teenagers with excuses. I winked at her. Daniel and Jessica were amateurs compared to the time your cousin Lupita tried to convince me she had been studying at the library when she had been seen kissing Robert behind the church. We were laughing when my phone rang. I did not recognize the number. Mrs. Parker, this is Detective Ruiz from the Special Investigations Department. I need to speak with you about the case you reported today. Sure, Detective. What do you need to know? I would prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning and bring all the documentation you have on Daniel Miller and Jessica Davis? Of course. Can I ask why the Special Investigations Department is interested in this? There was a pause before she answered. Because, Mrs. Parker, we believe your discovery today has exposed something much bigger than a two-person operation. After hanging up, I looked at Sarah, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. Mom, what do you think that means? I thought about the meticulous details of Daniel and Jessica's plan, the way they had calculated exactly how much money was worth the risk, their specific knowledge about different types of drugs, and their effects, the careful progression from small to large victims. I think, daughter, that Daniel and Jessica were not working alone. What do you mean? I mean, the plan was too sophisticated, too professional. Someone was teaching them, someone with experience. Sarah went pale. Do you think there are more people like them? Not just more people like them, I said, getting up to close the curtains. Suddenly, I felt as if someone might be watching us. I think there is a whole organization of people like them, and now they are looking for us. I do not know, I admitted, but tomorrow we are going to find out. That night, Sarah slept at my house for the first time since she had moved to her apartment. Not because I had asked her to come, but because she appeared at my door at 11 at night with a suitcase and tears in her eyes. I cannot be alone in that place, she told me. Everything reminds me of him. I installed her in her childhood room, which I had kept exactly the same since she left. While I prepared the sheets that smelled of lavender, I realized that for the first time in years, my daughter needed me. Not for money, not for career advice, not for validation about her life decisions. She needed me for the most basic and fundamental thing, safety. And while I listened to her crying quietly in her room for the man she thought loved her, for the friend she thought understood her, for the innocence she had lost in the course of an afternoon, I made a decision. If there was a bigger organization behind this, if there were more people hurting women like my daughter, I was going to find them. After all, now I had experience being a detective, and unlike Daniel and Jessica, I really knew how to protect the people I loved. The police station at 8 in the morning was exactly as depressing as I expected. Coffee that smelled like wet cardboard fluorescent lights that made everyone look like corpses, and the kind of tense silence that suggested no one had slept enough. Detective Ruiz turned out to be a woman of about 45 years, with short gray hair and the kind of direct look that told me immediately she tolerated no nonsense. Mrs. Parker, she told me when I sat in front of her desk, I want to thank you for the documentation you provided yesterday. It was exceptionally detailed. You are welcome, Detective. What have you found out? Several interesting things. She opened a folder and took out photographs. Do you recognize any of these people? The first two photographs were obviously Daniel and Jessica, but taken in different contexts. Daniel wearing an expensive suit at what looked like a formal event. Jessica on a beach in a bikini that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When were these photos taken, I asked. Daniel at a corporate event in Miami 6 months ago. Jessica in Vegas 3 months ago. Detective Ruiz looked at me carefully. Did your daughter mention if they had traveled recently? Daniel told Sarah he was saving money to buy a house. Jessica told her she was paying off debts from her previous divorce. Both lies, obviously. She took out more photographs. The following photos made me feel physically sick. Daniel and Jessica in expensive restaurants and luxury hotels on what were clearly expensive vacations. But they were not alone. Who are the other people in the photos? That is the million-dollar question. Detective Ruiz pointed to an older couple in one of the photographs. Meet Robert and Claudia Stevens. He is 55, she is 52. Supposedly, they are business mentors. Supposedly. In reality, we believe they are running a romantic scam school. I felt as if someone had dumped ice in my stomach. A scam school, an operation that teaches young, attractive couples how to scam single people with money. Detective Ruiz took out a diagram. It works like this. The Stevens identify potential victims. People with good jobs, significant savings, and vulnerability aspects recently divorced deaths in the family social isolation. Like Sarah, after Jessica convinced her to distance herself from me, I murmured, exactly. Then they train couples like Daniel and Jessica in specific manipulation techniques. How to gain trust, how to isolate victims from their support systems, how to get financial information. Detective Ruiz showed me more photographs. There were at least 6 different couples at various events, all young, all attractive, all posing with the Stevens as if they were one big, happy family. How many victims are we talking about? Based on what we have discovered in the last 18 hours, we believe this organization has been operating for at least 3 years. We have tentatively identified 15 confirmed victims. 15. The number hit me like a slap. 15 women like my daughter, and 2 men. The scam works in both directions. Detective Ruiz closed the folder. Mrs. Parker, I need to ask you a favor. Whatever it is, we need your daughter to cooperate with us to set a trap for the Stevens. What kind of trap? Daniel and Jessica do not know we have connected the Stevens to the operation. When they get out on bail, which will happen because their lawyers are very good, they are going to report to their bosses that something went wrong. And we want Sarah to pretend she has decided not to press charges, that she is embarrassed and just wants everything to go away. The very idea made me tremble. Detective, my daughter is barely processing what happened to her. Now you want her to act as if she were willing to forgive the people who planned to kill her. I understand your reservations, but if the Stevens believe Sarah is not going to be a problem, they might try to contact her directly to apologize or to make sure she keeps quiet. And that would help us how? Because it would give them the opportunity to incriminate themselves to admit knowledge of the entire operation. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of the decision. On one hand, I wanted to keep Sarah as far as possible from this whole situation. On the other hand, there were 15 other victims who deserved justice. Detective, what happened to Patricia Mendoza, the woman who ended up with brain damage? Detective Ruiz tensed up. What makes you think we know something about Patricia Mendoza? Because I said, with the patience of a woman who had already suspected the answer. When people like Daniel and Jessica casually mention someone had a convenient accident, it generally means the accident was not so accidental. We are investigating Patricia's case. Her doctors always thought her injuries were inconsistent with a simple fall down the stairs, meaning she was pushed, meaning her injuries suggest she was hit with something before falling. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, trying not to imagine my Sarah in Patricia's place. Detective, if I accept that Sarah cooperates with you, I need guarantees. What kind of guarantees? Guarantees that she will never be alone with any of these people. Guarantees that you are going to arrest the Stevens before they have a chance to hurt anyone else. And guarantees that my daughter is going to have protection until this nightmare is over. I can give you all those guarantees, Mrs. Parker. And if something goes wrong... Detective Ruiz looked me directly in the eyes. If something goes wrong, Mrs. Parker, it will be because I made a mistake. And I promise you, I am not going to make mistakes when it comes to your daughter's safety. There was something in her tone that told me this investigation was personal for her too. Detective, is there something you are not telling me? My younger sister was a victim of a romantic scam 2 years ago. Different organization, but the same type of manipulation. She lost her college savings and took months to recover emotionally. Did you catch those responsible? No. They took off before we could gather enough evidence. Detective Ruiz leaned forward. This is my chance to make sure this does not happen to anyone else. I understood her completely. After all, I had spent the last 24 hours feeling exactly the same determination. Detective talked to Sarah. If she is willing to help, I support her decision. But on one condition. Which one? I am also going to be involved in this operation, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. Mrs. Parker, that is irregular. Detective, I interrupted. Yesterday, I proved I am quite capable of handling professional scammers, and I know my daughter better than any trained officer. What are you proposing exactly? I am proposing you use me as the element the Stevens are never going to see coming, because I bet in 3 years of training scammers, they never taught them how to deal with a protective Mexican mother who has decided the time for being polite is over. Detective Ruiz smiled for the first time since we started talking. Mrs. Parker, I like your style very much. Sarah agreed to cooperate with the investigation, but only after making me promise I would be present every step of the process. Mom, she told me while we ate in my kitchen that night, if we are going to do this, I need to know my support system is solid. And you are my support system. I have always been your support system, my daughter. Only for a while you let other people convince you that you did not need me. I am never going to make that mistake again, she promised. Detective Ruiz's plan was relatively simple. Sarah was going to return to work on Monday and act as if nothing had changed. If anyone asked about Daniel and Jessica, she was going to say it had all been a misunderstanding, that she had decided not to press charges and she just wanted to move on with her life. The key, explained Detective Ruiz, during our Friday afternoon meeting, is to appear vulnerable, but not suspicious, as if she were embarrassed by the whole situation and wanted it to disappear. It is not going to be hard to act embarrassed, admitted Sarah, because part of me really is embarrassed to have been so gullible. That is exactly the attitude we need to project, said Detective Ruiz. The Stevens look for victims who blame themselves instead of seeking justice. My role in the operation was seemingly simple. Continue being the protective mother who insisted on checking that Sarah was okay. If the Stevens made contact, my constant presence would give them a sense of security. After all, how dangerous can a 62-year-old grandmother be? What they did not know was that this particular grandmother had spent the last 3 days studying every detail of their operation as if it were a doctoral thesis. Monday arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. I accompanied Sarah to her work, officially because my car was in the shop, unofficially because I wanted to see her colleagues' faces when they found out she had forgiven Daniel and Jessica. Emily, the receptionist, told me when we entered the building, "It is so good you are here, Sarah John." Everyone is so surprised about what happened Wednesday. "It was a misunderstanding," replied Sarah with the perfect voice of a woman who wants to change the subject. "These things happen, but is it true that Daniel and Jessica?" Like I said, it was a misunderstanding. Everything was resolved. Sarah took my arm. Mom let us go to my office. While we walked down the hallway, I could feel the eyes of all employees following us. Conversation stopped when we passed and resumed in whispers when we had passed. "This is awkward," murmured Sarah. "It is supposed to be awkward," I reminded her. "If you act too comfortable, they are going to suspect." In her office, Sarah checked her messages while I pretended to read a magazine. In reality, I was observing every person who passed by the hallway and memorizing who seemed too interested in my daughter's activities. At 10:30, a woman I did not recognize stopped at the office door. "Sarah, I am Linda from the Human Resources Department. Could you come to my office for a moment?" Sarah looked at me. We had rehearsed for this possibility. "Sure, Linda. Mom, can you wait for me here?" "Of course. Honey." After they left, I immediately took out my phone and dialed the number Detective Ruiz had given me. "Detective, this is Emily Parker. A woman from Human Resources just took Sarah for a private meeting. Name: Linda." There is no Linda in the Human Resources Department of that company. Mrs. Parker. I felt as if I had swallowed a stone. "What do I do?" "Stay where you are. We are on our way." I hung up and tried to look like a bored mother waiting for her daughter. In reality, I was calculating how long it would take me to get to the Human Resources Department if I had to scream for help while running. 5 minutes later, Sarah returned with an expression that told me immediately something was wrong. "Everything okay, honey?" "Yes, Mom. Just company papers." But her eyes were sending me a different message. Danger. "Well, then let us go. You promised to help me with grocery shopping. Remember." We had not made plans to go grocery shopping, but Sarah nodded immediately. "Sure, Mom, let us go." We left the building walking casually as if we were in no hurry. It was not until we were in my car that Sarah collapsed. "Mom, that was not Linda from Human Resources. It was a woman who claims to know Daniel and Jessica. She gave me this." She handed me an elegant business card that said, "Claudia Stevens Strategic Relations Consulting." "What exactly did she tell you?" that Daniel and Jessica had told her about our misunderstanding, and she wanted to make sure I was okay. That sometimes young couples make mistakes, and she wanted to help resolve any remaining confusion. And what did you tell her? That I appreciated her concern, but everything was resolved. That I just wanted to move on with my life. How did she react? She told me it was very mature of me to forgive and forget. And then she asked me if I had spoken to anyone else about the situation. I started the car and left the parking lot. Did you tell her you had not spoken to the police? I told her my mother and I had decided to handle it as a private family matter. Good. Anything else? Yes. Sarah looked at me with scared eyes. She invited me to lunch tomorrow. She said she wanted to apologize on behalf of Daniel and Jessica and possibly discuss compensation for the inconvenience. A compensation? Her exact words were sometimes when young people make mistakes. Mature people like you deserve to be compensated for their understanding. Ah, so they were trying to bribe my daughter to keep quiet. And did you say yes? I told her I needed to think about it, that I would consult with my mother because I value her advice. Perfect. I dialed Detective Ruiz's number. Detective, we have contact. The Stevens. Claudia Stevens. Specifically. She wants to have lunch with Sarah tomorrow to discuss compensation. Excellent. Where and when? They still haven't agreed on the details. Sarah is going to confirm this afternoon. Mrs. Parker, this is exactly what we expected. They are trying to buy Sarah's silence. And that is good because it is evidence of consciousness of guilt. If it really had been just a misunderstanding, they would not need to offer compensation. After hanging up, Sarah and I went directly to my house, where we passed the rest of the day coordinating the details of the lunch trap with Detective Ruiz and her team. The restaurant is going to be full of undercover officers. Detective Ruiz assured me that afternoon. And both you and Claudia Stevens are going to wear microphones. Am I going to wear a microphone too? Of course. You are going to be having lunch at a nearby table, pretending it is a coincidence you are in the same restaurant. And if Claudia recognizes me from the photos, there are no photos of you anywhere on Daniel and Jessica's social media. They kept their real lives very separate from their scam lives. That night, while Sarah slept in her childhood room for the 4th consecutive night, I stayed awake thinking about everything I had learned about human nature in the last week. A week before the most complicated thing in my life was deciding whether to buy the expensive brand of detergent or settle for the generic one. Now I was coordinating undercover operations with the police department and preparing to face a criminal organization. Life apparently can change completely in the time it takes to lock a bathroom door. But I had also learned something more important, that when the people you love are in danger, you discover strengths you did not know you had. Tomorrow I was going to meet face-to-face the woman who had trained Daniel and Jessica to hurt my daughter. And I was going to make sure it was the last time Claudia Stevens had the opportunity to hurt anyone else. The Terrace restaurant was exactly the kind of place where a woman like Claudia Stevens would feel comfortable. White tablecloths, waiters with vests, and prices that screamed, "I have money, and I want everyone to know it." I arrived 15 minutes before Sarah and asked for a table with a perfect view of the table, where she was supposed to sit with Claudia. The microphone I wore taped under my blouse felt like a giant insect, but Detective Ruiz had assured me it was imperceptible. Just act natural, she had told me that morning. Order food, read a book, pretend you are enjoying a quiet lunch alone. Easy for her to say. Detective Ruiz was not the one about to face a woman who trained professional scammers for a living. At 12:30 exactly, I saw Sarah enter. She looked perfect, nervous, but not terrified, well-dressed, but not too groomed like a woman who was trying to maintain her dignity after an embarrassing situation. Claudia Stevens arrived 5 minutes later. I recognized her immediately from the photographs I had seen at the police station, but in person, she was even more impressive. 52 years old, but she looked 40. Designer suit that probably cost more than my rent for 6 months. Perfectly styled hair and makeup that seemed to have been applied by a professional artist. She approached Sarah with the smile of a woman accustomed to people doing exactly what she wants. "Sarah, dear." I heard her say as they sat down. "Thank you so much for agreeing to see me. I know this must be hard for you." "I appreciate you coming, Mrs. Stevens," replied Sarah with the perfect voice of a woman who wants to be polite but keep distance, although I am not sure why it was necessary for us to meet. "Please call me Claudia." She leaned forward with a sympathetic expression. "And it is necessary because Daniel and Jessica are like children to me. When they make mistakes, I feel personal responsibility. From my table, I pretended to be reading the menu while straining to hear every word." Mistakes, asked Sarah. "Is that how you see it? Dear Daniel told me the whole story, how emotions got out of control, how an innocent situation was misinterpreted." Claudia took Sarah's hand over the table. "Sometimes young people confuse professional friendship with something more personal. I had to squeeze my napkin not to get up and scream at her to let go of my daughter's hand." "An innocent situation," repeated Sarah slowly. "Being naked in my bathtub is an innocent situation. Oh dear, I understand it must have been shocking to walk in and find that, but Daniel explained to me that they had been discussing Jessica's marital problems, and they got into the bathtub to have privacy, because your mother was in the apartment. Naked. Sometimes when people are very emotionally upset, they do not think clearly about propriety." Claudia let go of Sarah's hand and took her menu. "The important thing is it was just a misunderstanding, not a betrayal, and the plan to steal my money. Was that also a misunderstanding?" Claudia stiffened for a second so briefly I almost did not notice. "Plan? Dear, what are you talking about?" "Daniel confessed they had a plan to access my bank accounts." "Oh, that." Claudia laughed as if it were the most ridiculous thing in the world. "Daniel was trying to sound more important than he is. He had mentioned he wanted to help you organize your finances better after you got married. You know how men are. They always need to feel they are solving things. After we got married. Well, yes, Daniel was planning to propose to you. Did not he tell you?" I saw how the information hit Sarah like a slap. For a second, her mask of calm slipped, and I could see the real pain in her eyes. "No," she said finally, "he did not tell me." Oh dear. Claudia leaned forward with a compassionate expression. It was not supposed to be like this. Daniel wanted it to be a perfect romantic surprise. "A perfect romantic surprise," repeated Sarah. "While he was having an affair with my best friend. It was not an affair. It was emotional confusion. Jessica was going through a difficult divorce and Daniel was trying to be a good friend, a very good friend." Sarah Claudia took a more serious tone. "I understand you are hurt. Any woman would be. But do you really want to ruin the lives of two good people for a moment of poor judgment?" There it was, the first real attempt at manipulation. "I am not trying to ruin lives," replied Sarah. "I am just trying to process what happened. Of course, and that is completely natural." Claudia took her bag and took out an envelope. "But I also think you deserve compensation for the emotional pain they have caused you. Compensation. Daniel and Jessica have put together money to demonstrate how much they regret what happened. It is not much, but it is a gesture of good faith." Sarah took the envelope but did not open it. "How much?" $50,000. I felt as if someone had set fire to my chair. $50,000 to buy my daughter's silence about a plan that would have resulted in her death. "It is a lot of money," said Sarah carefully. "It is what Daniel would have spent on the engagement ring," explained Claudia. "Figure it is as if he had bought the ring anyway, but now you can use the money for something you really need." "Like what?" "Well, you could take a vacation, get away from all this drama, or maybe invest in your career, take some additional courses. Or I could stay quiet about what really happened." Claudia laughed, but there was an edge to the sound. "Dear, what would you stay quiet about? We already agreed it was all a misunderstanding." "Of course," said Sarah quickly. "I was just, well, it is a lot of money. It makes me wonder if there is something else I should know." "Like what?" "I do not know." Have Daniel and Jessica had similar misunderstandings before? The change in Claudia was subtle, but unmistakable. Her smile became tighter, her eyes more calculating. Why do you ask that? Because if it is a pattern, maybe I was not the only woman who felt confused by their behavior. Sarah, I think you are overthinking this. Probably. It is just that my mother always tells me that if something seems too good to be true, it generally is. Your mother sounds very wise. She is. In fact, Sarah looked casually around the restaurant. I think that is her. Claudia followed Sarah's gaze directly to my table. Your mother is here. What a coincidence. Mom, come here. I got up from my table with the perfect surprise of a mother who accidentally meets her daughter in a public restaurant. Honey, what a coincidence. I walked to her table, watching how Claudia evaluated me quickly. I could see her calculations. Older woman, well-dressed but not expensive, posture that suggested confidence but not aggression. In short, exactly what she would expect from an ideal victim's mother. Claudia, let me introduce you to my mother, Emily Parker. Mom, this is Claudia Stevens. She is a colleague from work. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Stevens, I said, shaking her hand. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Parker. Your daughter is a very impressive woman. That is what I have always been told. I sat in the empty chair without being invited. Excuse me for interrupting, but when I saw Sarah, I could not resist coming over to say hello. Do not worry, said Claudia. But I could see she did worry. In fact, I am very pleased to meet the woman who raised such a wonderful daughter. Oh, Sarah has always been special. Very trusting, very generous with people. I looked her directly in the eyes. Sometimes too generous. Well, generosity is a beautiful virtue in a young woman. Yes, I agreed. Although I have learned that some people confuse it with naivety. Claudia held my gaze without wavering. Fortunately, Sarah clearly has a mother who protects her well. I do what I can, although I must admit sometimes I worry about the people my daughter meets at work. Oh, why? Well, recently there was a situation with some of her colleagues that unsettled me quite a bit. Mom interrupted Sarah quickly. I do not think Claudia needs to hear about that. Actually, said Claudia, and now there was steel in her voice. I would love to hear a protective mother's perspective. It was at that moment I realized Claudia Stevens was not just a scammer. She was a predator who had decided I was a threat that needed to be evaluated. A protective mother's perspective, I repeated slowly, holding Claudia's gaze. It is quite simple, actually. Please share, said Claudia. And there was something in her tone that told me this conversation had stopped being about Daniel and Jessica. A protective mother learns to recognize certain patterns. I explained keeping my voice conversational. For example, when someone says something was a misunderstanding but offers $50,000 in compensation, it suggests that maybe the misunderstanding was not as small as they pretend. Claudia laughed, but the sound had nothing genuine about it. Mrs. Parker, I think you are misinterpreting the situation. Really, because from my perspective, it seems you are trying to buy my daughter's silence about something that goes far beyond simple infidelity. Mom, said Sarah nervously. Maybe we should. No, my daughter. I think Mrs. Stevens and I need to have an honest conversation. I leaned forward. Do you know what else experience taught me, Mrs. Stevens? What? That when someone trains young people to scam money from single women, they generally do not stop at a single victim. The change in Claudia was instant and terrifying. The mask of understanding woman disappeared, completely replaced by something cold and calculating. Mrs. Parker, I think you are making very serious accusations without evidence. Oh, I have evidence. I took out my phone and put a photo on the table. It was Patricia Mendoza in her wheelchair, taken from a newspaper article about domestic violence victims that Detective Ruiz had found. Do you recognize this woman? Claudia looked at the photo without expression. No, it is Patricia Mendoza. Daniel was engaged to her before she had her accident. I do not know what you are talking about, do not you? Because I have recordings of Daniel and Jessica talking about their pattern of victims. Linda Ramirez, $5,000. Lucy Vargas, $25,000. Patricia Mendoza, $90,000. And permanent brain damage. For the first time since I met her, Claudia looked genuinely surprised. Recordings. 43 minutes of complete confessions, including the part where they discuss their plan to drug my daughter and make it look like an accident. Claudia looked around the restaurant, clearly calculating her options. Even if that were true, it has nothing to do with me. Does not it? I smiled with all the sweetness of a grandmother offering cookies. Because I also have photos of Daniel and Jessica on multiple expensive vacations with you and your husband, and bank records showing transfers from the victims' accounts to companies controlled by you. This was a complete lie. I had no bank records. But Claudia's reaction told me I had hit the nail on the head. I do not know who told you those lies. No one told me anything, Mrs. Stevens. I discovered it myself. Do you know how? How? Because you made the mistake of underestimating a mother who knows her daughter well enough to know when something is wrong. Claudia stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. No, I said, also getting up. This conversation is just starting. It was then that all the customers at nearby tables got up at the same time, showing police badges. Claudia Stevens said, Detective Ruiz, appearing next to our table, "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and assault with attempted murder." Claudia looked around the restaurant, finally understanding she had walked straight into a trap. "This is entrapment," she said, while Detective Ruiz put the handcuffs on her. "No, Mrs. Stevens," I replied. "This is justice." "Did you get everything I asked, Detective Ruiz, while they took Claudia away?" "Every word. Her implicit admission of knowledge about the previous victims, her bribe attempt, and especially her lack of surprise when you mentioned the plan to drug Sarah. Is it enough for a conviction? Combined with Daniel and Jessica's confessions and the evidence we have gathered on the other victims, it is more than enough." 3 hours later, we were at the police station again, this time giving final statements. Mrs. Parker said, "Detective Ruiz, after we finished, I want you to know your work as a civilian has been extraordinary. We've arrested the entire network. The entire network. Robert Stevens was arrested this morning in Phoenix, and we have identified 6 more couples working for them. All will be arrested in the next 48 hours. And the victims, 17 in total, all will be contacted and given the opportunity to recover at least part of their money from the confiscated assets, including Patricia Mendoza, especially Patricia Mendoza. Also now we have evidence to reopen her case as attempted murder instead of accident." That night, Sarah and I sat in my kitchen with a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion. "Mom," said Sarah after her second glass, "I still cannot believe you solved an entire criminal organization. I did not solve anything." "Honey, I just refused to let them hurt my daughter. How did you know to ask all the right questions? How did you know what to press and when? 62 years of raising people, working with people, observing people. One learns to read between the lines. But the recordings, the documentation, the way you handled Claudia today. Sarah, do you know what the difference is between a Hispanic mother and a professional detective?" "What?" "A detective looks for evidence to solve a case. A mother looks for evidence to protect her children." I took her hand. "And when you threaten a Hispanic mother's children, you have just awakened the most relentless force of nature." Sarah laughed, but then got serious. "Mom, can you forgive me for pushing you away, for not listening to your warnings, for being so?" "Stop," I interrupted her. "There is nothing to forgive. You were a victim of people who are experts in manipulation. And besides, without their manipulation, I never would have had the chance to prove that a Mexican grandmother can be more dangerous than any professional scammer. What is going to happen now? Now you are going to go back to your normal life. You are going to make new friends, more carefully this time, but without fear. You are going to find love again, more wisely this time, but without cynicism. And what are you going to do?" I smiled. "I am going to go back to being a normal grandmother who worries if her daughter is eating enough vegetables. Just that." "Well," I admitted. Detective Ruiz mentioned the police department is considering a pilot program of civilian consultants for family scam cases. Did they offer you a job? They offered me the opportunity to make sure what happened to you never happens to another family. Sarah smiled for the first time in a week with pure happiness. Mom, I think you just found your true calling. 2 months later, I received a letter from Patricia Mendoza. She had recovered enough memory to remember fragments of what Daniel had done to her, and she wanted to thank me for helping bring her attackers to justice. Mrs. Parker, she wrote, "My family says you are the reason we finally have answers. I cannot remember everything that happened to me, but I remember the feeling that something was wrong. Thank you for listening to that feeling and acting accordingly." At the bottom of the envelope was a photo. Patricia in physical therapy, smiling while holding a painting she had created. The brain damage had affected her memory, but she had discovered an artistic talent she never knew she had. Sometimes she had written on the back of the photo, "Terrible things lead us to discover strengths we did not know we possessed." I put the photo on my refrigerator right next to a new photo of Sarah and me at her graduation from a self-defense course she had decided to take, because I had learned that the best gift a mother can give her daughter is not to protect her from all the bad things in the world, but to teach her that she herself has the strength to face anything life presents her. And if she needs help, well, that is what mothers are for, especially Hispanic mothers who have discovered that revenge is best served with meticulous documentation and the cooperation of local authorities.